most of the strikes in the late 1800s, the United States government either did not intervene or went so far as to intervene on the side of management. Shocker. Federal troops were used in the Great Railroad Strikes of 1877 and 1894. That would put us with President Grant, and 1894 is President and President Cleveland. So a Republican and a Democrat, it doesn't matter. For instance, however, the actions of Teddy Roosevelt in the coal strike of 1902 set a new tone in labor-government relations. This became a centerpiece of Roosevelt's progressive reputation in the coming years and showed that Republicans as well as Democrats could respond to the era's zest for reform. Coal was a very common method of home heating in the early 1900s. Often there would be a central stove connected to a ventilation system with a steady supply of fresh coal needed to keep the system working. There was no real backup material at the time. It would be until the 1920s and later that coal was widely challenged as a home heating material, thank God. The coal mining region of eastern Pennsylvania rose to meet this demand. There are two primary types of coal. Come on, thesaurus lady. Bithumi. I'm usually good at these.
Where are we looking?
Bituminous. Bituminous and anthracite. Anthracite, I know. While bituminous. I was bituminous, okay. When bituminous coal is easier to ignite and more commonly found in the U.S., anthracite coal is a superior product when it comes to providing heat. The eastern region of PA contained and still contains the largest deposits of anthracite coal in the U.S. Shocker. And you wonder why Fetterman cannot be completely against coal.
Where are we going? What are we doing with this whole thing, though?
And furthermore, located conveniently to all of the major northern industrial cities in the early 1900s, coal miners had a number of grievances related to the work they performed. Coal was extracted from deep shafts, and the process was labor-intensive. Hazards abounded. 200 people or more died in a single incident at Schofield Mine in Utah in 1900. In the country as a whole, well over 1,000 miners died each year. From 1900 all the way through the end of World War II, pay was also a serious issue. Labor shortages had been solved with the use of immigrants from Europe. Wow. Hours were long. Operators of the mines were not disposed.
Would it make you happy if it were slaves from Africa?
Definitely. Were disposed to compromise on such issues. In 1900, there has been an incident between the Pennsylvania miners and the mine operators, and the operators had been pressured to make concessions by the McKinley presidential campaign, lest the strike cause bad press in his re-election contest. The union representing these miners was the United Mine Workers of America, led by John Mitchell. In early 1902, this union made demands for additional wage increases and an 8-hour workday. Ding, ding. And the resulting impasse led to the strike of May. It's not impasse.
It's impasse.
Led to a strike on May 12th. 147. Imagine this at the time, considering how long ago it was. 147,000 workers left their job on this day, determined to press their position to the utmost. Mine owners, led in this contest by George Baer of the Pennsylvania and Reading Railroad, if you've ever played Monopoly, you would know that, were equally determined to dig in without the distractions of a national election to pressure them in further concessions. At first, there was little reason to believe that this would be any more remarkable than the myriad other work stoppages of the era. The longer the miners remained off the job, the more the mines fell into despair. Yet most of the mine owners assumed that the strike would collapse if they maintained their own resolve. Hired guards of questionable quality, we know what that means, and scruples, see the coal and iron police, ooh, that sounds bad, surrounded the mines when the strikers intercepted and harassed incoming trains and threatened the lives of any scabs. As summer turned into fall, it became clear that no quick solution was forthcoming. Watching from Washington, Teddy Roosevelt became increasingly alarmed. The cost of coal in the U.S. continued to increase, putting consumers and businesses alike at the mercy of a shortage. Public anxiety about prospect of a winter without coal was beginning to make itself felt. Additionally, this was at the beginning of a great progressive era in American politics and society, where just 8 years previous, Grover Cleveland had dispatched the U.S. Army to end a railroad strike in Illinois. Roosevelt now had different ideas. Using his personal and political connections, he was able to establish a commission to settle the issues brought forth in the strike. The initial meeting took place on October 3rd with all the key actors, and it was decided that a longer-term investigation would commence. In return, the miners returned to work on October 23rd in time to ensure a steady supply for the winter. At the time, the Anthracite Coal Strike Commission began its work. After much political wrangling, this commission eventually ended up with 7 members, including one labor union man, whose official role was eminent sociologist. This commission interviewed 538 people in the coal industry, both workers and management, over the course of 3 months. They also extensively toured the anthracite coal region of PA. And their final verdict was a 10% increase in wages and a 10% decrease in working hours from 10 to 9 per day.
That was like a Charles Dickens version of just saying what happened.
The legacy of the strike. Politically, Roosevelt's strong intervention worked to his advantage. Many third-party businesses had been dependent on the coal industry and were not completely opposed to the Roosevelt stance. The incident played to Roosevelt's reputation as a vigorous, action-oriented president, and Roosevelt himself did not shy away from expressing his opposition to corporate monopolies. He won the biggest electoral victory in our nation's history in 1904 against a more conservative Bourbon Democrat. The longer-term effects of the strike were just as important. Where the federal government in the past have been strongly pro-business in such labor disputes and now acted in a more neutral manner, which is a win for labor. This portended a shift in mentality that eventually led portended. Okay, thesaurus lady. Eventually led to much increased regulation, such as the Hepburn Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. That is actually having regulation on the quality of your food.
Okay, so is that the end? Is that the finale yet?
It would be decades before unions won full protection and recognition in the eyes of the federal government. The Wagner Act of 1935, under Franklin Roosevelt, was the capstone in that regard, driven by the perils of the Great Depression. However, in the process, it had a beginning point. It could be said to the strike. Where did it begin? It began with the strike of 1902 and Teddy Roosevelt's response.
Are we done now? Thank you.
That's the difference between a bad president and a great president. And that's how significant of a difference it really is. And again, this is one of the biggest reasons why Teddy Roosevelt, you can look at Washington, you can look at Lincoln, you can look at FDR. But for my money, the reason I side with Teddy as being our greatest commander-in-chief is simply this. He stood up to corporate power and he protected our environment like no other president ever did.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.